Okay, so we're on page 119, and we're talking about volume today. So I wanted to look at your purple sheet. So last year in 5th grade, you found volume of a rectangular prism. Remember, volume is something, if you have a 3D shape, you're filling it up. Okay, I always think of pouring water in or pouring sand in, filling something up, a 3D shape. Okay, so this is a 3-dimensional shape. And last year on your sheet, it told you length times width times height. Okay, that's technically still how we're finding volume of a rectangular prism. So what they did was, this used to be length times width. Okay, so now they've renamed it base times height because of all the other shapes that you had to find the area of. They didn't have a length and a width. They had bases and they had heights. So they renamed these, all right, but they're still length times width, all right? The dimensions can still be named like that. So what this capital B means, it's capital for a very specific reason. It has to be calculated, okay? Any capital letter in any of our formulas has to be calculated. It's not just something you can measure on a 3D shape or a flat shape. So since it's capital, it has to be measured, okay? So, calculated. So since it's capital, it has to be calculated. And so that how we find the area of the base, okay? That's what that capital B means. So I want you to think of a Kleenex box. What shape does it sit on? Okay, it's going to be sitting on a rectangle. So what this area of the base, what this capital B is, how it is calculated, is we're going to be finding area of the rectangle. So we're going to be finding base times height. So it's base times height. And then this other height is not the same as this height, okay? This height right here is talking about how tall this 3D shape is, all right? This is the flat shape, the flat base that it sits on. That's base times height. And then this is how tall, all right, the 3D shape is. So when we're solving the formula, you're going to say area of the base times the height, okay? Which really means length times width times height. Okay, you're still doing base times height times the height. We're still multiplying the 3 dimensions together to get the volume. All right, how we label volume is a little different than area because it is a 3-dimensional shape. It can be filled up with something. So instead of saying square centimeters, we have 3 dimensions that were multiplied. Centimeters times centimeters times centimeters. Centimeters times centimeters times centimeters. And we're going to label that centimeters cubed or cubic centimeters. All right, so imagine in this shape that we have these little cubes, these little 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch cubes, and we're seeing how many cubes it takes to fill up this shape. Okay, and that's why it's labeled like this, cubic centimeters. So we're going to write our formula. On your homework, you're given another sheet that has each step on here. Okay, so this is written for you. And underneath it, because it's capital, it means that we have to calculate it. So that means area of the base. Okay, so the base right here, see how it's a rectangle? What it's sitting on is a rectangle. So our base times our height is going to be 4 times 2, right? And then we can't forget how tall the shape is. So it's going to be times 3. So 4 times 2 is 8, times how tall it is, the height. So we have 24 cubic centimeters. So if we had those little cubes, that 1 by 1 by 1 cubes, we would have 24 of them that would stack up in this shape. Okay, so that's our volume here. Over here we have the same thing, area of the base times the height. So if it's capital, it means it has to be calculated. So base times height, that's the area of this base that it's sitting on, area of a rectangle, times how tall it is, okay, the other height. So we have 2.5 times 8.5 times how tall it is, which is 3. So 2.5 times 8.5 is going to be 12.25 times 3 is going to be 63 75 cubic inches. So that's your volume right there. So on this one right here, they have, they've given you the volume, okay, 320 of those cubes that are stacked up in here. And then they're giving you the base and the height, and then they want how tall it is. They want the other height. So if we write our formula, okay, volume equals area of the base times the height. Area of the base, okay, it looks like it's going to be a rectangle here. Okay, there's our base right here. So base times height, and then how tall it is. Okay, so that's what that means. So let's put our numbers in now. Our volume is going to be 320. Our base and our height is going to be 10 times 4. And then we want to know how tall it is. So we're going to leave that as h. So we're going to look for something that we can do to make this simpler. So I see two numbers we can multiply. So 10 times 4 is 40 times the height equals our volume of 320. So some number times 40 equals 320. So we're going to solve for h. How do I get rid of times 40? The opposite of that, or the inverse of that, is dividing by 40. So we always do the inverse operation to solve. Okay, I'm going to simplify that by dividing both by 10. Okay, we call that I for an I. 32 divided by 4 is 8. So since it's a height, it's not cubic centimeters because it's not a volume. It's just centimeters. Okay, so our height is going to be 8 centimeters. So if you wanted to check yourself, you could say 8 times 4 times 10 to see if you would get your volume of 320. So on the back, we're going to skip number 1, we're going to do number 2. So it says the model is a picture of the base of a rectangular prism. So it's almost like you took, let's say like this Kleenex box, and you put it down like this, and you traced around the bottom of the base, okay? So this is just the base. This is a flat shape, all right? So here's your base, and here's your height. And then they're giving you how tall the prism is, okay? And it's going to be 24 inches. And they're going to ask you, what is the volume? So the model is a picture of the base of a rectangular prism. So it's like they put a box down and they traced around the bottom, okay? So there's the base. Measure the base and the height to figure out of the figure to the nearest ½ inch. Okay, so you're going to take your purple sheet and you're going to measure to the nearest ½ inch. So to the nearest ½ inch means that, okay, remember this line halfway, this longer line halfway in between 2 and 3 is 2.5. So is this right here, the edge of this rectangle, closer to 3 or closer to 2.5? Well, it's about a little over 1 jump to 3, but it's about 1, 2, 3 jumps to 2.5. So it's going to be closer to 3 inches. Okay, now your height, okay, here's 1.5 right here. So it's a little closer to 2 than it is to 1.5. So our height is going to be 2. So when I write my formula, it's area of the base times the height. Remember, it's capital for a reason. It means it has to be calculated. So area of the base would be base times height, okay, area of that rectangle, times how tall that it is. So we have base times height times how tall it is, which is our 24 up here. So 6 times 24 would be 144 cubic inches. Just like that. So you have one on your homework that's very, very similar. So on your homework, it's going to look like this. Okay, now remember, when you have 1/2, this can be changed to 0.5 for easier multiplying. So you have 1 through 8 here, and on the second sheet, I made it on a separate sheet of paper so that you can tear it off. Okay, so on this first one, I put your formula for you. What shape is the base? Well, it's going to be a rectangle. So I'm going to put base times height right here to show what that capital B stands for, how to calculate that capital B, that area of the base. Then you can plug your numbers in and get all the way to the volume. Don't forget your labels.